back, Expanding the Zone. I'm Shane Combs, joined here by my brother Matt. We are at show number 20. Why the Secrets is what we're talking about this week, and real excited to kind of dive into this topic tonight, Matt, with everything going on. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it like I usually do at the beginning, just because the first 2 or 3 things I'm going to be throwing at you will kind of be self-explanatory on why we are doing the topic this week that we are. I do want to announce to the fans that next week, show 21, will be our football show, State of the Game. Earlier, we talked a little baseball. Coming up later, closer to winter, we've been announcing for several weeks now our State of the Game basketball. So next week we'll be doing State of the Game football. I'm going to be talking to some coaches this week and getting a lot of feedback. So excited. I think you'll really enjoy that particular show as we gear up for what we hope is a safe high school start and eventually a little bit of college and hopefully some NFL as well. So again, State of the Game football next week. But for this week, Matt, certainly have a great topic. Why the Secrets? I'm just going to dive right into it. Again, appreciate everybody joining us here on the YouTube channel, SVC Sports Zone Shane, or if you're out there on the podcast app, iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, all the way across the board. Again, thank you. Just the feedback's been tremendous, having a lot of fun with Expanding the Zone. And, Matt, on that note, I want to dive right into just general leadership. When we talk about secrets, a lot of times what we're kind of hinting at here is communication or lack thereof. And I want to stay very general in your opening remark in terms of what are the dangers or what are the problems that bring this topic to the forefront here when we do not have clear or concise leadership in terms of communication.
Well, we've talked a lot on this show over the past 20 episodes or whatever we're at now of the importance of clear, concise leadership. Our show kind of revolves around leadership in general, obviously, and really leadership 101, so to speak, is you better be clear and concise with your message, right? The people that you're leading need to know what's going on. And I think as we get into the show tonight, we're going to talk more about this. I won't get into it too much right now, but we obviously are in a time right now where there's a lot of confusion, there's rumors, there's assumptions, I heard this, and is this true? And some of that's just because this thing we're in with COVID's chaotic, right? But some of it, I think, can be attributed to poor leadership or leadership that is lacking in some way. So I think we're going to get into some of those things, but I think those, to answer your question, the danger is the rumors that fly around, the assumptions that aren't true, but yet people maybe run with, right? And all those things can lead to just problems, I guess. So I know we're going to talk about several angles of this, but I think those are the dangers.
Well, let's just dive into the obvious angle here. Over the last week or so, really maybe even more than that, do you feel like the OHSAA, the governor, high school sports, all of this that's stirring, I can't help but have my mind go there as I listen to you kind of give those general remarks. Where do you stand on kind of what you just said in your first answer in terms of applying that to what we've kind of been going through with our high school sports?
And I've said all along, I mean, let's face it, the governor and the OHSAA, they're in difficult spots. I get that.
Oh, sure. Yes.
And I understand that they're sort of low-hanging fruit right now. It's very easy to pick on them. It's very easy to say, oh, well, they're terrible. And I've tried throughout this show, as you know, not to do that. I think we've tried to be fair, I think, and give both sides. But the thing that jumps out at me the last couple of days, again, is that lack of just clear, concise instruction. I think when it comes to what let's just look at Tuesday. We're doing this show on Thursday, the 20th, right?
20th.
Today.
Yep.
2 days ago, on Tuesday the 18th, that was sort of the big day here in Ohio for high school sports, right? The governor was going to announce, are we going to have contact sports, football, soccer, and the such?
Afternoon press conference. I think it was a 2:00 start.
Exactly. And, so he comes on and after a little bit, basically says, we're going to move forward with these sports, that we're putting out an order that gives you specific detail as to the mandates and the requirements and what you have to follow. basically he sort of summarized that there was going to be a limit on spectators, and his description was family and loved ones. That's what he said. Okay, so obviously really really vague. Now I understand that in a 45-minute press conference or whatever it is, you can't get into just great detail and read every every line of the 7-page order or whatever. But he's pretty vague. You would think that the order would come out immediately so that guys like me, the athletic directors, the principals, they can dive into this and say, okay, what do we need to do? Because we had unanswered questions, right? We spectators, for instance, how many people were going to be allowed to let in? I was in a meeting with our health department, the day of that press conference, and we're sitting there saying, well, we could do this, this, and this, but we got to wait to see what the governor says. So he gives this speech on a Wednesday or on a Tuesday. We don't get the order until Wednesday evening. And I'm thinking to myself, you can't put the order out right after or the next morning when we get to school so we can get started on this. You see what I'm saying? It's that lack of clarity, and it's the delay. I mean, we're already up against the clock here. Most schools have volleyball games starting as early as next Monday, where they're going to have fans in attendance. Mm-hmm. Obviously, football starts next week. Some schools are scrimmaging tomorrow. So do you not see a need for some immediate instruction? Like, hey, listen, you gave your speech, put the order out there. Let's not wait 24 hours or more before we can get our hands on this order to see what's going on. And I just feel like, don't you feel like, Shayne, it's sort of been that way through this thing? It's been like real slow baby steps. And when we do make a decision, we just don't go all the way in there. We sort of tiptoe in, and it really leads to problems for the schools.
Well, you'll hear me talk about like almost the stair step thing and it kind of goes with what you're saying of everybody's waiting for that other person to tell them what they're allowed to do so that they can, start to move forward. I can't help but think about another connection that brought this topic on this week in terms of with me is in college sports. You have all of these people going a different direction. First of all, the fact that the NCAA makes billions and billions of dollars every year, and they don't really have a clear-cut leader or like CEO, it blows my mind. That's right. Confusing. They do have some conference commissioners and so forth, but some of these conferences are putting out schedules, and then they're saying there's no season, and then now you got players petitioning, and now you got teams and schools coming back, and hey, we're going to try to play. Parents want answers, and it's like coming at you from 5-6 different angles. I can't help but think that kind of your clear, concise formula doesn't fit here as well. Haven't we seen it in the college game as well?
Well, I'll be honest with you, Shayne. I mean, the whole Big Ten situation is really sort of what sparked this show almost. You and I, if you remember, talked a few days ago, and it was like, you talk about some
yeah,
if lack of leadership or at least lack of clear, concise, I mean, you're talking about a conference that put out their schedule, like 6 days before they canceled their season. So they put out this schedule, hey, we're all in. And then all of a sudden, 3 days later or so, hey, you can't practice with pads. And then like 3 days after that, we're done. And no explanation. Now, some people might say, well, they don't have to explain to anybody. Well, yeah, they really do, because you're talking about multi-million is probably not even true. It's more than that, $1 billion, industry here.
No question.
Yeah. Big Ten football alone, let alone, now these are all fall sports for the Big Ten, but to sit there and say that these athletes and these parents, they don't deserve some explanation. In fact, it took the parents, if you remember, Shayne, it took the parents demanding an explanation, having to give the commissioner a due-by date, like, hey, by this date, you're going to explain to us what's going on. Mm-hmm. And then the commissioner came on and did it, but was, again, so vague in his description of why they did it. There's still not been an explanation. Now, let's look. If you think that as a conference, this is the right thing to do, that's fine. You're within your rights to believe that. If you feel like this virus is enough of a threat, but do you not owe people an explanation that goes a little further than, the health and safety of our athlete is paramount in what we do? I mean, yeah, we get that. That's everywhere. Now explain to us why you're canceling an entire fall sports season for one of the biggest conferences in America. Again, it goes back to that. The word that comes to mind, we keep saying be clear and concise. But don't you think in this situation it comes down to transparency a little bit? Like,
Yeah.
just be
Yeah.
transparent.
Well, there's no question about it. I keep thinking about just trying to take care of the simplicity. And again, I'm not implying that the answers are simple, but I'm saying that the leadership, I think you even called it Leadership 101, the simplicity of at least saying, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it. Sometimes I know I'll even say it that way. Look, I'm not saying I'm 100% right, but I'm telling you, I've put a lot of thought into it. Here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it. Let's go. And it's one of those. I think of Charles Barkley the one time when they asked him as a player what he thought of the 76ers new uniforms, and he said, my kids with a piece of paper and a box of crayons could have done better. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those where it's, that, again, I'm not implying it's simple, but at least the idea of how to go about presenting your idea is somewhat. Matt, what do you think when it comes to higher level sports, higher level athletes, big time profile athletes? You'll see people get in trouble. Obviously, we've seen famous broadcast things in our notes that comes to mind. There's different things. Where do you stand on what is our business? What's better left unsaid compared to, again, I think you just used the word transparency, just getting it out there to where you kind of kill the rumor mill, don't you?
Yeah, I think that's more of it for me. I've never been one of these people that thinks, well, we deserve to know everything that's going on just because
Right.
it's America and we're the public and we should know. But sometimes I feel like people make major mistakes in just not being truthful or honest and owning up to something. That accountability we've talked about before, right? And the transparency of just saying, like, things that come to mind. Two things come to mind really, that one's a sports and one doesn't have a whole lot to do with sports. But like, take the Tiger Woods situation years ago. Remember when all that went down?
Sure. Yeah.
That started with like some bizarre car accident in his driveway,
I think
right?
you and I were watching like Auburn, Alabama football or something. Just some bizarre story comes on.
Yeah, I can't remember what we were doing, but it's like, okay. And then, all this other stuff starts to come out. Now think about this, okay? So he basically goes in stealth mode, doesn't say anything for, I can't even remember how long. While that was going on, every rumor known to man starts coming up, right? Well, that he did this, he did this, he did this. Well, by the time that he finally addressed the situation, it was so far out of control with just the stories that it was so far gone. It was hard for him to even reel it back in. And then do you remember his press conference, how vanilla and like staged that thing was?
Yeah.
And I mean, we're big Tiger Woods fans. We like watching Tiger
Oh,
Woods.
absolutely.
This was awful. I mean, he comes out there, this prepared statement. I guess my point is, I often wonder how that whole thing would have went for him if basically 3 days after it happens, he just comes out and just says, look, guys, I've made some terrible mistakes in my marriage, in my personal life. I've got some things I've got to get right. I've messed up big time. Yeah, I apologize to my fans. Give me some time to get my life together. I hope to get back on tour. So,
Yeah. So again, you're not going into the personal details that are none of our business, but it does give a little bit of a truth and a little bit of upfront transparency.
I just feel like it would have killed because some of the story, what made it so intoxicating, I guess, was just, it was like, oh, the unknown. Look at all this, man. If he comes out and just says, hey, then boom, he takes the air out of that balloon right now.
Yeah.
And you can't convince me in America, the way we are in terms of as a whole, we're pretty forgiving after a while, especially of our athletes. Let's be real honest here. There's times if we like an athlete, we sort of look past stuff, right? It happens at every level. And we would have been like, hey, look, dude screwed up. Hey, he admitted it. It took some guts to admit it. He's going to move on. But instead, he handled it the way he handled it. How about another one? I don't want to act like I'm going back to my junior high American history days, okay? But Jfk assassination, right? There's probably been
that's interesting. Go ahead.
There's probably been no other thing in our lifetime. Now it's starting to lose some steam now because it just keeps getting further and further away. But when we were growing up, what was the big thing? Oh, there's conspiracy. There had to be more people involved, right? Why is that? Well, because think about it. Think about the way it was handled from the start, right? You had a commission put together in the Warren Commission that said, we're not going to release these for like 75 years. We're not going to release our findings, basically. The guy that was accused of assassinating him was shot dead 2 days later. All these things, right? led to the mystery of it. And because our government did not come out immediately and say, hey, here's the full report, total transparency, you guys look it over, take a read, right? And if that would have happened, it would have diffused a lot of that. But instead, that mystery, that silence, not being transparent, what did it do? It caused imaginations to run wild. It caused speculation. And I just think we get a lot of that at a much smaller level, obviously, in our schools and in our sports. The more you sort of hold back and you sort of, maybe I shouldn't tell them this. Maybe I shouldn't say this. I just think sometimes it does more harm than good.
Well, and it becomes harder and harder to do, Matt, because it becomes there's more room for rumors to go now because of social media and so forth. So if you take it from 65 to 85 to 2000, 10, 2020, I mean, as I keep moving up the line, think about how many more avenues there would be out there for the rumors to take off and kind of create a life of their own.
Sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, you're right. It's just because of the nature of the world we live in today, people can run with stuff immediately. And so I think it's even more important and I understand there are times, especially in cases where maybe there's some legal things going on.
Sure, absolutely.
You can't always just say, hey, here's everything. I get that. But I just think there's a lot of times we feel like, maybe we should just sort of not hold back and not say anything on this or wait and see. And it's like, why so secretive? I mean, some of this stuff's not, it's not national security here, right? Let's just get it out there and make everybody aware of what's going on and go from there. But yeah, I mean, I just think, the word that comes to mind there, like I said, is just transparency. We had talked, Shayne, a little bit about we both agree sort of that leaders do this, right? They hold things back sometimes, or they're slow to react. I guess as a whole, the best way to phrase it would just be why, right? I mean, why? I mean, why do you think that that leaders are this way?
Well, I've thought about this a lot this week in prep for the show because you had kind of thrown this out at me, in a various forms of the question. You've kind of been asking me this throughout the week, and here's what I've come up with, and I want to see if you follow me. I feel like there's a lot of leaders that question who's in charge. What often happens is, as different scenarios unfold, different people have a little bit more control, a little bit more power. Here's the easiest coaching example I can give you. Like in our league here in the Cider Valley Conference, our volleyball teams are really, really good. I've always said if you stay south of Columbus, somewhat east of Cincinnati, pretty much southeast corner of the state, we play really, really good volleyball. There's certainly a handful of teams out there in the Southeast District that compete with us here and there. But for the most part, it's very commonplace for our last place team to beat champions from neighboring conferences.
Right.
So as a result, over the last 15, 20 years, as I've coached, this happens in baseball, this happens in softball. I've heard volleyball coaches say, Shayne, we need to get out on the weekend and we need to go play. Well, as I just described to you from a geography standpoint, to do that, it might mean get on a bus and drive 2 hours. So if you start to put on your AD cap, okay, the coach makes a leadership decision for his or her program. We need to go play this level of competition in the non-league. Okay, so they're leading. They're being concise. Hey, we want to go play these schools. So they come to you as an AD. Well, now where does their power stop, I guess is what I'm saying. And this is where the breakdown sometimes comes. So every school's probably a little bit different. Do you as an AD have the ability and the power to say yes, no? Do you need to talk to principal? Do you need to talk to superintendent? And before you know it, there's about 4 different leaders all involved in this decision to decide if this school is allowed to travel an hour and a half. Is it 2 hours? Are they allowed to do it 3 Saturdays? Are you going to make it 1? And before you know it, trying to put together a schedule becomes really, really confusing because I'm the coach. I'm supposed to get back with this coach. I've been there in baseball before. I'm waiting for my AD, or I'm waiting for my principal or my superintendent or the bus supervisor, or all these different people involved to go. So that's just one example. As you play AD there, what are your thoughts there in terms of how that happens. It might even connect it to COVID in terms of like with the ticket sales this week, in terms of how many people you're into the game. Don't you kind of see that in terms of who's in charge? We're all kind of trying to figure it out, but who has the final say? And does it kind of keep us all from stepping out in front and saying, hey, I say we do it this way?
Well, I think to answer your question is if in that scenario, for instance, if that coach doesn't know whether he or she can schedule that game on their own and step out there and do that, then that's been bad leadership, quite frankly, by the people above them, right? Because as an AD, it's my job to make that coach aware, hey, if you get an opportunity to schedule a game, go ahead. You know, you got my blessing on it. Let's get out there and go play. So then that coach
Or we
knows.
allow this many trips over an hour and a half this year or whatever. Yeah.
Well, right. And that it goes back to that. Yeah, exactly. It goes back to that coach and that coach and that AD being on the same page in terms of what they're wanting for their programs, wanting to accomplish. And that's really the AD's job, probably, to translate that to the coach. Just like in this COVID situation, right? I mean, you get a lot of that right now too, because it's like, okay, who can make this call? Well, you know, maybe I should talk to my principal. Maybe I should talk to my superintendent. Well, these principal and superintendents are overwhelmed right now, right? Obviously, they have a lot going on. I mean, this is kind of a crazy time if you haven't noticed, right? So, as an AD, do I just go ahead and make that call on how we do tickets at one of these games, or how we're going to limit capacity to 15%? Again, it's a time that demands really clear and concise instruction from the people at the top, whatever that is. If it's a coach AD relationship, then that's that AD's job to do that, right? If it's a school-wide thing, it's probably the superintendent or principal's job to do that. It's because this isn't a time right now for, I mean, we're starting school back up, right? This isn't a time for like, well, hey guys, if you don't mind, could you throw that mask on and go over there and stand? No, I mean, we sort of need some, you're going to do this, and this, right? It has to be very structured, I've been impressed at my school, for instance, the teachers and the staff so far, how well they've done with it. But it's like, man, you're talking about structured, right? I mean, lunch rooms and hallways. But my point is this: can you imagine if your leadership is lacking, if it's all over the place? You're going to have a heck of a time right now. And I think, to answer your question, the who's in charge, quote unquote, because I mean, I think we're all sort of, you know, we all have a responsibility, right? But the who's in charge thing, that should not be something you're asking in the middle of a decision. Does that make sense?
Well,
You
it
should
makes
know
total
that
sense.
you should know that in advance.
Well, and I, you know, that makes a lot of sense. I think the mistake that leaders make sometimes, I know I made it as a young leader, where I wanted to, you know, you always want to be the player's coach, or like when you're talking to other coaches, you want to kind of make them feel a part of it too. But the problem is when you are a leader and you're putting something out there. If I say to you, if you're my assistant coach, Matt, and I say to you, Matt, I really want you to take over the defense.
Right.
Okay. And in my mind, I'm thinking I want to play man to man, and you take over the defense in the first scrimmage. We come out in the first quarter and you're out in a 1-3-1 and you play it for the first 6 minutes of the quarter.
Right.
It's a little unfair of me to be mad at you. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
If I wanted to play man, the conversation should have went, hey, Matt, I'd really like for you to take over the defense. Now, my philosophy is I'd really like for us to have an identity of man to man. I'd really like for you to look into that, tell me what you think, where will it work, where will it not work, that type of thing. Now we can have more of a professional conversation, but you know, kind of the expectation set in the first place. So many times I've been asked to do things as a veteran teacher that I gladly step in and do, but I'll be honest, I sometimes I feel a little bit funny in terms of stepping out and demanding this, demanding that. How much money do I spend? What resources do I have if we're you know, fixing up this particular hallway or this space, or if we're putting this curriculum piece in, you know, all of those different things in terms of accountability and getting buy-in from the staff and so forth. I just think that's kind of a tricky thing. Don't you think the same thing kind of happens in the classroom in terms of staff when it comes to principals and superintendents and so forth, and it starts to crawl into the curriculum the same way it can our athletic department?
Well, it's really delegation with guidance. You know,
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, we're going to, it's just like you said with your example of giving your assistant coach a role to play. Yeah, you're saying you're delegating, but at the same time, it's like, now understand, I want you to put this system in place with this in mind. This is kind of where I want this team to go. I want this to be our identity.
Mhm.
Now, can you put together a plan to get us there? You know, and but you're kind of giving that person a little bit of guidance. And I think sometimes if you're not careful, you know, and you see this sometimes, whether it be in our jobs at schools or I'm sure in the private sector too, where, hey, okay, this person can handle this. You've got my full support. I trust you, man. Go take care of it. And then they go take care of it. And it's like, whoa, what are you doing? Why'd you do that for? Well, you told me that I could take care of it. This is what I
Yeah.
believe we should do. You know, so it's kind of, it's not real fair for a leader to come back after the fact. But what happens sometimes, and we know this, and we've talked about this before, and maybe it's just one of my pet peeves again, right? The appearance thing mattered more than anything else. But
Right.
how many times do you see a leader say, "Yeah, go take care of that," and then when it doesn't work out and they catch heat for it, who do they go back to? They go back to that person. So and so just gave me 10 types of crap for you not doing this. Yeah. Well, what, you know, so it's like you're punishing that person who you've given that responsibility to because it didn't work out well and you caught heat for it. That's a little bit unfair too, don't you think? I mean,
Well, and it is, and there's nothing more frustrating from a leadership standpoint than for them to say, "Hey, Shayne, put this in play," and okay, I've got this program I want to run, and then as you start to get into it, we don't quite have the funding for this, we don't quite have the resource for this, we don't quite have enough people for this, and then it kind of, by the time it gets into steps 2, 3, 4, 5, it's not even what I envisioned anymore, and then
right,
sure enough, well, that was Shayne's idea. You know what I'm saying? So
right.
again, it's, you know what you sign up for in leadership and stuff. But to answer your original question that I've been thinking about all week is, why does this happen? I think sometimes, Matt, there's a question of who's in charge. It's just like with high school sports. Who is making the decision? Is it the governor? Is it the OHSAA? Is it the health department? And then
Sure.
once they put their stuff in play, is it the superintendent? Is it the principal? Is it the athletic director? Is it a league president? Uh,
Sure.
all of these different things play a role. So when you get like 8, 9, 10, 11, I know we've had some of our early staff meetings, and I'm blessed with where I work. We really get along, and we have professional discussions, and we don't always agree with each other, but I'm telling you, we always figure it out just because. But I've also been a part of a lot of different teams where, man, you get 6, 7 egos in the room, and you're just going to talk in circles, right? You're never going to
Oh
quite
yeah.
find a happy medium.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what's happened here with the unique accountability. Here's something else I'll throw to you in terms of communication. Do you feel like, Matt, that we are in a scary generation of communication where all the texting, all the emails can sometimes lose that face-to-face conversation? Like the one thing I've noticed here on Expanding the Zone compared to my SVC Sports Talk is you and I are sitting here looking at each other when we
Right.
talk. So we
Right.
have a little bit more conversational piece and so forth. I think sometimes what happens is you can lose the personality in an email, in a text. We live in a day where people almost freak out if you ask them for a 15-minute staff meeting. I know a lot
Yeah.
of times I'll have a principal where we'll have about, not a long one, 10, 15-minute staff meeting a week, because what I find is when one leader addresses everybody, the message is consistent across the board. Like what happens with me sometimes is I hate when I have to kind of give a particular introduction into something to like 3, 4 different groups,
Right.
because it's very difficult sometimes to give that exactly the same. Okay, so what happens is, I'm sure you've been there before, man, or in station work in a basketball camp or something. Oh, I kind of left that out there. I kind of left that out there. I wish I'd added this, that type of thing. I know a lot of times, I'm not saying I don't meet a lot with my individual players, but a lot of times, if it comes right down to it, I like to address the whole team. You know what I mean? It
Right.
just put it right out there, like you said, one message across the board. Do you feel that's something that leaders better be cautious of? I'm not saying there's not a point of email and text. I mean, believe me, text that practice has changed to 3:30 sure beats the 12 different phone call chain that we used to do, way back in the day. Okay,
Right.
I'm not saying it's not good, but don't you think some of the personality, some of that face-to-face conversation kind of really hurts some of the relationships in leadership?
I do. I've seen it, and I've seen it with kids for sure. Okay, like I think back of how, I played on a team in high school where as much as much as we lacked some maturity off the court, we were extremely mature on the court because our level of communication was off the charts. I
Right.
didn't realize it then, but for like 16 and 17-year-old kids, the way we talk to each other, I mean, it was so brutally honest. I mean, kids don't do that now. You don't
Right.
sit in a meeting anymore and call out a teammate constructively, obviously, just
Mhm.
the kids don't do that. They're uncomfortable with that. It's like, whoa, we don't want to do that. Now it's like, I'm gonna pass this piece of paper around. I want your opinion, because if you don't do that, you
No,
don't get
right.
any kind of communication.
Yeah.
But I've also seen it, and I think the reasons for that are obvious, right? I mean, we don't have to get into all that. I mean, these kids have grown up in a texting generation, and they don't really face to face communicate as well. But beyond that, I've seen it with adults too, and I've seen, like, I think sometimes you mentioned the meetings, right? We had an AD meeting. We've had 2 or 3 AD meetings here in the last month. We usually only have one a month, but
Right.
with all this stuff going down, we've had to, and I know it, like in one of our meetings, we were all sitting there, right, spread out, with our mask on. This was the one in-face meeting we had, and one of the ADs brought up, like, hey, do you think we ought to come up with some plans for this, this, and this? Well, obviously, there was a lot of unanswered questions, which goes to the whole thing about this show, right? Well, what's the governor going to do? What's the OHSA going to do? They
Right.
hadn't done a good job being clear and concise, like we talked about tonight. They left us out there a little bit hanging. But at the same time, as an AD group, should we use that as an excuse, or should we maybe come up with a plan and say, if things go the way we think they are, let's go ahead, we'll have something in place. And if we have to modify this based on what the governor says, fine. Instead, what we did was, like, one AD brought up that maybe we should do this, and it was crickets. Like, nobody spoke. And I work with a great group of ADs. Don't get me wrong. These people are professional. They do a wonderful job at their jobs. I mean, 75, 80% of these people have been doing it for several years now. We haven't had a lot of turnover. Great group.
Mm-hmm.
But that particular day, it's just like we sat there and we looked at each other, and nothing was accomplished. I mean, zero was accomplished. And it was, one, because of the lack of a clear and concise leadership. But I think also what you're talking about, it's like, if we start this discussion, I got this sense, okay, and I hate to speak for everybody, but this is the sense that I got. If we start this discussion right now, we're going to be in here for an hour. You're all going to be throwing ideas over the place, right? Everyone's going to want to talk and get their 2 cents in. And it was almost like, well, why don't we put a put a Google sheet out there, and everybody can kind of type in their opinion, and we'll look it over. We're almost to that point, like you said, where instead of that conversation, right, that face to face, we'd rather do it in an email, in a Google Doc. But sometimes it's because we're asked to do a lot, right? Sometimes we think it expedites it. Well, it'll be a little quicker if we do it this way. But is quicker always better, right? I mean, sometimes talking is better. Sometimes having the meeting and making decisions. I don't know. I left that meeting that day thinking we really didn't make any decisions today. We didn't. I'm no better off than when I showed up today in terms of knowing where we're going as a league. And I kind of hated that, really, for us as a group.
Two things jump out at me as I hear that. Number one, early in your answer there, I couldn't help, Matt, but go back to you have some really, really good leaders in that room that I feel like, in listening to you, felt powerless, right? You want to jump in, you want to lead your athletic programs, you want to say, we're going to do this, we're going to put this many people here, we're going to put safety protocols in place. But again, what is it you're waiting for? Are we allowed? And how many times do our leaders wait to see if they're allowed? And like you said, if things can be put out there in a much quicker, more concise way, a clear way, I think that helps. The second thing, and I don't mean to go off topic too much here, but I had just put a thing out on the actually on this YouTube channel. It's called SVC Sports Talk Plus, where I was talking about our league, but I think it's very relevant here, so I'll share it with this audience as well. I've been asked the question, Matt, in high school football, who do you think it favors in terms of this quick turnaround? Well, my answer was this. My answer talked about, well, I think the obvious answer is experience, right? If you have
Right.
experience coming back or not a lot of coaching turnover, whatever. But here's the hidden factor, and this might be the baseball coach in me. I think it favors the people who had the maturity and the leadership and the focus to approach the last 5 weeks the same way you would the last 5 weeks in any year. Hey, we're going to have a season. We're going to prepare. We're going to practice. We're going to train. We're going to watch film. We're going to do, you know what I'm saying? Those are the people that when all of a sudden wake up, 2 days ago and be like, oh my gosh, we have like 7 or 8 days, not only to get ready for a game, but our league opener. Okay.
Well,
So
yeah, it's
don't
the
you
prepared.
think
Yeah.
don't you think it's the people who have had the maturity? Because in baseball, it was hard for me to look at my guys and say, we got to keep practicing. You never know. Hey, 3 weeks, we're going to come back. We're going to play. Let's do this, workout this. Now, obviously we didn't get to, but I can honestly say our guys were ready if we would have. And unfortunately we didn't get to, but don't you kind of see where I'm coming from? It's one of those things where I feel like there's a lot of leaders that almost use it as a cop out. We're just going to kind of wait and
Yes.
see. And then all
Yes.
of a sudden now when it's time, they're shell shocked that, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with the schedule? We start in 7 days.
To me, it what you just said there was so spot on. And what it is really is it favored the prepared is basically what you're saying.
Right,
It favored the ones that prepared themselves regardless of the unknown, right? They
Yeah.
prepared themselves. They didn't let the unknown cause them to not make a decision. That's my whole point. Like when I was giving my example of like our 80s meeting, I
Sure.
think sometimes we allow it to cause indecision, and and indecision then leads to a lack of preparedness, right? Because you don't make any decision, then you're not prepared, and all of a sudden, I even had one person say to me in that room that day, guys, look, you know as well as I do, we're probably never going to play a football game anyway. Because that was the whole attitude, right? I mean, how many
Right.
people? I wish I had $1 for everybody that come up to me over the last 2 months and say, there's not a way in the world we're playing football this year. Well, if
Unless
nothing
something
happens in
changes
the
in less
last
than
next
24
week,
hours, I'm about ready to go to a scrimmage tomorrow night.
if
You know
if
what I'm saying?
if you're telling me if Ohio State doesn't play football, that we are,
Right.
looks like we are.
Yeah.
Okay. What
Yeah.
I'm saying is I'm not saying those people were wrong and I was right, because I honestly, there were times I found myself believing the same thing. All I'm saying is you have to prepare like you're going to play. Yeah. How many times did our coach in high school say, now, if it snows tomorrow morning, when you get out of bed, don't be sitting around all day thinking we're not going to play tonight. We're going to play. You got to plan on playing. Why?
Make yourself stay game day until it's off. Yeah.
Exactly, because again, it's going to favor the prepared mind, that person who is thinking all day. Again, we haven't talked a lot tonight about indecision, but I think it's important, to at least mention. We've talked about the lack of clear and concise leadership, but don't you think indecision causes some problems too? I'm going to expose your uncoolness here for a minute, but have you ever heard of a musical artist named Halsey?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Well, you're cool enough. I mean,
Well, because you remember you made fun of me on some earlier shows. My during the time away from sports, you're forgetting how much American Idol or
oh,
Songland or The Voice or
yeah.
those types of
Okay.
things. So Halsey's been a little mentor here and there on some of those.
Okay. Well, see now, yeah. And I got to be
So
honest with you.
actually, you're trying to apologize that I am cool.
Well, it's pretty obvious. It's like you, the Fonz, and Snoop Dogg are the three things in the world. Okay, but no, it's like to be honest with you, I didn't know too much about her until I heard the speech that she gave. That my whole point of bringing this up. I listened to this. I listened to a pretty cool app for a while, or a podcast for a while on my app that said that was basically a commencement speeches to the class of 2020, and I enjoyed listening to these different business leaders and artists talk to. And out of all the people, I wouldn't have thought Halsey was going to shine some light down here, but it was like she made a comment about how indecision can be worse than a poor decision. And I thought, wow, that's
Wow,
really
that's good stuff.
powerful when you stop
Good
to think
stuff.
about it. Like,
Yeah.
she goes, a lot of bad decisions I've made in my life led to future good decisions because I learned from them, right? And it talks about sometimes indecision can be worse than a poor decision. And I don't think that says just go out and make whatever decision and screw it if I, because sometimes indecision or poor decisions can be really detrimental. Obviously, they can cost people jobs or cost people whatever. But sometimes it's that sitting around, and I think that's what you're talking about, not doing anything. I used to have a quote. I used to have a quote hanging in my office that said, I wondered why somebody didn't do something, and then I realized I was somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like you got to step up sometimes and be the one to do something, to make that decision, because I think that's a problem in leadership too. Not just the lack of clear, concise leadership, but sometimes none at all, or just no decision being made.
Well, don't you think a great analogy, Matt? You hope you have leaders on the basketball quarterback in a huddle. Sometimes if a play's not getting called or communication breaks down, just somebody getting everybody on the same page. Because if we all let's say out of bounds play number one wasn't the best thing to run there, wouldn't it be better for all five people to run out of bounds play one instead of having two or three run one and then one run two and one run three? And now you got a mess, right? So that's a great analogy of what you're talking about. I coach with a guy that I've heard him say before, hey, even if I'm wrong, let's go ahead and do it really hard and we'll talk about it later.
Yeah. Do it quick, do it fast, do it hard, even if it's not
what I mean? Like, and that's kind of what you're saying, isn't it? That indecision kind of fits there.
Yeah. No, there's no.
I want to try something here. But before I throw this at you, let me ask you, because I always like to, before I go into a final thought that I want to do a little different this week, or is there anything else that in your notes there that you want to add, just in terms of, because this is going to kind of maybe take us down a different direction?
No, I think we covered it. Again, just to sort of summarize, that the importance of clear, concise leadership. Just everybody you're leading needs to know what's going on. Be accountable. It goes a little bit with like your IDEA acronym that you used in the past. The acceptance phase of that. Be accountable for your decisions, obviously. And don't be afraid to make decisions, right? That avoid that indecision. So no, I think we definitely covered those points that we wanted to.
I have 5 words written down here, Matt, that throughout the show I've kind of have put down here in my notes. I'm going to give them to you one at a time, and I want you to just I'm going to put you on the spot here. I just want you to kind of give me kind of a final thought on what it is about that word that you think we as leaders need to look in the mirror, and then the leaders out there listening to us here this evening might really be able to help themselves, as, let's face it, we're getting ready to go into a real difficult time as teachers and coaches here, trying to really lead our youth through some difficulty. Number one is fear. When you hear fear with tonight's topic, what is it about a leader that you think needs to be talked about when I say fear? And again, for the listeners here, I'm throwing this on Matt. He had no idea I was doing this, because I wanted to get your most honest take in terms of how you reacted to the show.
Well, I think there's 2 levels of fear. I think there's the fear of, if you're wrong, what it can do to the people that you care about, that you're leading, right? I think that's a legitimate fear. But then I also think there's a fear of, well, if I mess this up, what will people think of me? And I think that's the one, if you're a true leader, you got to get over, because if you're always worried about what everyone's going to think, you're just not going to be a very effective leader. You're not making everybody happy. You're certainly not getting 100% approval rating in this situation right now. Nobody is, right? Legitimate concerns for your people, yes. Think about those things. What position am I putting my people in right now? Am I putting them in a situation to succeed? But if you're just worried about what people think, you may want to do something else, because leadership, you got to get past that.
Good stuff. Second word, and again, take these in whatever direction you see fit. Maybe you and I aren't even looking at them the same. The word power. Power.
For me, power, I don't know. I just feel like I feel there's got to be somebody in charge. I get it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's probably got to be some level of hierarchy for organizational purposes. But I've never really loved that word, because I really feel like we all have a responsibility to do our part, and that everybody really equally can make or break you. You know, like, it's not just on the superintendent or principal of the school. The teachers have to do their jobs too, you know, and the custodians have to do their jobs, and the cooks have to do their jobs. It's everybody has a certain level of power to get the job done. So you know, for me, yeah, we need some hierarchy, we need some pecking order, but at the end of the day, every level has to take responsibility.
Fair enough. That's well said. How about relationships?
Well, we've talked a lot about this in our show. I mean, I just think it's the number one thing, right, in leadership, your relationship with your people. It's how you treat people. It's like, you know, I've seen situations where people screw up, and you know, and again, I think it comes down a little bit to um, the equity somebody builds up, you know. But like, again, if a teacher of 20 years makes a mistake, you'd like to think that person's not just going to get called in the office and just get verbally undressed, right? But, you know, hey, this person made a mistake. They put a lot of good years in. Let me just call them in and talk to them. You know, again, but it goes to that relationship, right? Like, what relationship does the leader and the other person have, to where, do you have the type of relationship where you can be brutally honest, where you can just lay it out there? Do you have the type of relationship where, well, I may need to sugarcoat this a little bit, not to hurt this person's feelings and to get through to them? But yeah,
Yeah.
we've talked about it in coaching for sure, right? I mean, people will say, like, I can't believe that coach could talk to that kid that way, and that kid doesn't quit the team. Well, the reason the kid doesn't quit the team is because what you don't see is, after practice, that coach and that kid sit around for a half hour and talked about his home life, you
Right.
know, and, hey, man, I really care about you. So yeah, that coach can
No,
yell at
right.
that kid because that kid knows he loves him.
I love that you added that in there, because about halfway through the show, I actually had down the word trust, and I changed it to relationships here on my thing. So
Right.
that's exactly right. Building that trust to where, you know, when you do have to get in those tough moments, you kind of have that foundation for the relationship to be strong enough to handle it. The fourth word, Matt, is vision. Vision.
Well, we talked about this a little bit tonight. Like, this goes back to that clear, concise thing, right? You better be able to clearly express where you want that organization to go. And I think about it as a coach, you know, when at the beginning of the year, when we talk about our culture, and we talk about what we want to be as a group and what we want to look like as a group. And when I say look like, I'm talking about, what's our locker room vibe feel like? How do we operate on a day-to-day basis? It, I think it's one of the most important things early on in a process, is the leader's ability to really kind of express that vision.
Well, the last one, the word's next, but let me explain a little bit here, because I couldn't really figure out where I wanted to go with it. I've dealt with it a little bit here in terms of off-season workouts, because I'm more of a basketball, baseball coach. Obviously, do media work all the way through the year. You're right in the heat of the battle here with being an AD. I've talked to tons of ADs this week in terms of how they're going to handle certain things, and if you're talking about, can't really get you in the press box or stands, but if you're on the football field, maybe you won't count against the numbers much, or different
Right, right,
places you can
right.
stand, or in the volleyball game, different places, and all, creativity and so forth. But I guess when I say next, Matt, what I want to end the show with is, what's next? So, like, obviously you're dealing with it when you wake up tomorrow. For all I know, you guys still deal with it before you go to bed tonight. What is next? If you were just kind of given a message out there to fellow ADs, or if you're talking to some principals, or if you're talking to coaches, what's next in terms of, what needs to be done, or what the challenge is moving forward in terms of the consistency in which you need to conduct yourself with?
Well, it's funny, Alan Stein, who a lot of coaches that listen,
Yes,
if they listen to
outstanding.
this, will know
Yes.
who that is. He's excellent. Just leadership podcast that he runs now, strength and conditioning guy originally, but he's really transformed now into more of a leadership business speaker. Um, I just absolutely try to, I don't want to say live by necessarily, but really think on a daily basis of his definition of what highly successful people are. And he talks about how people who are highly successful, they control what they can control, right? And this is what made me think of this.
Mm-hmm.
They constantly ask the question, what's next? Next play mentality, right? What's next? And then that leads them into sticking with their process. So when you ask me what's next, I've thought a lot about this over the last few days. It comes to that, like, what can we control right now as leaders? What can we do? And for like us, it's hey, look, we've been given these mandates that we have to follow. We have to follow them. You know, we have to focus on our own stadium, our own facility, whether it be our gym, stadium, whatever. You know, our fans, making sure we're doing the right thing. We can't control what another school does. We sure as heck can't control whether any of our kids get COVID, whether any of the other team gets it, whether we have an outbreak. All we can do is every day at school, make sure kids are wearing their masks, we're social distancing at the games, we're following these guidelines. Because I told somebody the other day, you know, somebody's like, I don't want to have to wear a mask. Like, look, man, you know, nobody wants to. I said, but you know what? I have one goal right now as an AD. I have one thing on my mind other than the obvious, which is, you know, safety of our kids and all that. That should go without saying. I have one thing, and that is I want these kids to have a season. That's it. I don't want to have happen to these guys the same thing that you had to go through, Shayne, unfortunately, up close and personal, which is watching seniors who you love and care about not get to play their senior year of baseball.
Right.
So you're telling me you don't want to wear a mask? I'm telling you,
Right.
I'll do whatever it takes in order for these kids to get to play. And that's what we're telling our people. So when you ask me what's next, to me, that's what's next is I don't care who it makes mad or who doesn't like it. We're going to do what we have to do as a school to try to give our athletes a chance to have a season. To me, that's what's next.
That's really well said. It's kind of be that team player. It's funny. We were just talking about this afternoon at school, in one of our little staff meetings that we were putting together and talking about different protocols and stuff. And a lot of times, if you're not comfortable being in leadership, or if you're not really in a leadership role, we've talked about this before, Matt. There's a lot of value in being that great team player, that
Right.
follower, empower your leadership. You know what I mean? Like, what do I do next? Well, I'm gonna do what I'm told to do. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those things. So that's kind of my final thought for tonight. Anything, Matt, you want to add before I give the contact information? I think that's been a lot of fun tonight, but I certainly don't want to cut you off.
No, I don't really have anything. I think we covered it. We're excited about our next show. You mentioned it earlier, the state of the game for football. You know, this is something, neither one of us are football coaches, so we've definitely enlisted the help of some high school coaches we have a lot of respect for. We've made some phone calls, we've reached out. I don't know if we'll share any of the comments. I mean, I don't know if we're going to have any face-to-face interviews on here. I know we've kicked around ideas like that, but we've definitely reached out to some coaches, gotten some good feedback. We're just going to kind of talk a little bit about where is high school football right now. Now, when I say right now, maybe not, you know, because this is going to be an odd year.
Yes.
But in general, like in a normal year, where are we with high school football, and what's the state of the game? So it should be fun.
Fans, appreciate all the feedback through our first 20 shows. Continue to get involved. Email admin1@svcsportzone.com. Look us up out there on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, across the board. Again, check us out on YouTube. Subscribe to us so you always get your notification. That's SVC Sports Zone. Shayne, if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to get us on your podcast app there. We're out there on iTunes, iHeart, Spotify, all the way across the board there as well. So, Matt, that's a lot of fun on show 20. Really looking forward to show 21, state of the game for football. So, again, everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week on Expanding the Zone. Thanks.